Hey y'all, it's Alex from You Should Craft, and today I'll show you how to crochet the Alpine stitch. So this is a pattern that can help you create a super cool texture in your work. You can use this for like blankets, hats, cowls, kind of anything that you want. On that same token, you can use any hook and any yarn. So this is a Woolies Thick and Quick yarn. It's a super bulky, and I used a 10mm P crochet hook. But any yarn and any hook that matches will do. We'll just do like a small sample swatch today just to get the hang of it. But basically you're going to alternate 4 rows to create these like alternating post stitches. So you'll notice that they're like offset from each other. So here's an example of post stitches that are stacked. So one post stitch is put on top of the other ones and it creates these straight, like long skinny ribs. But for the Alpine stitch, there's one post stitch and then like a space and then another post stitch. And then on the opposite row, you're going to like put the post stitches in the spaces from before, if that makes sense. So you're not putting them right on top of each other. But anyway, let's talk about how to crochet this. So the Alpine stitch, like I said before, it can be crocheted with any hook and any yarn. I'm using Woolies Thick and Quick from Lion brand. And then I'm using a 10mm P crochet hook from Furls Crochet. But any hook and any yarn can do the Alpine stitch. So I like this yarn because I'm already using it for a project with the Alpine stitch, so I just like had it on my desk. But I'm going to go ahead and crochet an even number. I'm going to do 14 chains. You can do however many you want, but again, we want an even number of chains. That will just set us up properly for our Alpine stitching. I'm like awful at counting chains when I'm talking. 2, 3, 4, 5, 12. Here's 13 and 14. So you'll probably notice, I get a lot of comments about this, but you'll notice that I'm crocheting with both my yarn and my hook in my same hand. This does not affect my crocheting at all. Different people crochet in different ways. So yes, I know that it's not like the normal way to crochet, but I find that it reduces like my stress pain from crocheting. Like it reduces my hand and wrist pain. So I'm able to crochet for like a pretty long time without any issues, but just crochet in whatever way is comfortable for you. But so I've got my 14 chains, I've yarned over, and now I'm going to crochet into the back bump of the third chain from my hook. So here's chain 1, chain 2, and here's chain 3. And then if we turn our chain a little bit, we can see the back bump, which is this thing. So if you're just counting back bumps, here's 1, 2, and 3. So that's where we're going. And those first 2 chains that we skipped, that will count as our first double crochet. So I've pulled up a loop, I'm yarning over and pulling up the next 2 loops, yarning over and pulling up the next 2 loops, and there's a double crochet. So for the next one, again, I'm yarning over, inserting my hook, yarning over, pulling up a loop, yarning over, pulling up 2 loops, and those last 2 loops. So I'm just going to double crochet across this row in every chain that's left. So I'll end up counting those 2 chains at the beginning. I'll have 13 double crochets. And again, the reason we started with an even number of chains is so that we could have an odd number of stitches, which will just make our Alpine stitch, at least in a row, add up properly. If you were in the round, you would actually want an even number of chains to give you, well, you would want an even number of chains, which would then give you an even number of stitches. So that would help like line up your Alpine stitching properly. So again, I'm just double crocheting across this row, just across my starting chains. I've got 2 left. If you have not been crocheting for very long, you might be wondering why I'm going into the back bumps. That is because it gives a cleaner look to your project. So at the top of my stitches, I have these V's. And now because I've used the back bumps, I have these like neat, clean V's on the bottom too. So it makes the top of my work look the same as the bottom of my work. If you're putting a border or something on this, you don't really need to bother with the back bumps. But for something where this edge is going to be showing, like on a hat or a cardigan, even like a blanket without a border, I find that this gives you just like a nice clean look. So, all right. My next row is going to be a row of single crochets. So I'll chain 1, turn, and then just single crochet in both loops of every stitch. So insert my hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull out 2 loops. So there's 1 single crochet. Insert hook into both loops, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. I'll show you one more time. Insert into both loops, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through those last 2 loops. So this is my row of single crochets. And so we haven't done any post stitches yet. Our Alpine stitch repeat is going to start soon with our very first row of post stitches. But so now on this last stitch, I'm just going to insert my hook into both loops of the chain. This was that chain 2 at the beginning. And then I'll just do a single crochet like before. All right, so now the next row is going to be double crochets and front post double crochets. So I'm going to chain 2. This counts as a double crochet. And so now, since that's my first double crochet, I'm going to do a front post double crochet, but I'm going to do it in the second double crochet in row 1. So skipping this chain, inserting my hook behind the stitch, coming out on the other end, yarning over, pulling up a loop, and from here it's just a standard double crochet. So yarn over and pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through those last 2 loops, and then I'm going to do a double crochet in the next stitch, but it's a little bit weird. Here's the back of my project. This chain, or the stitch right here, this is what's going to be behind your front post double crochet. So I've kind of already used this one. So I'll put mine right here. So I'm skipping this stitch, sort of, and then going in here. It's not a true skip because there is a stitch in that space. It's just not directly in that stitch, if that makes sense. So now it's time for my next front post double crochet. I'll skip a double crochet down here and I'll insert my hook in the next one. So I'm going in on one side, around the back, and out the other side. And now I've got it done. So I'm yarning over, I'm doing a double crochet again, so skipping the stitch that's behind my front post double crochet, inserting my hook into the next stitch, and just doing a standard, running out of yarn here, just doing a standard double crochet. So now I'll yarn over, I've got another post stitch. So insert my hook behind the stitch, pull up my first loop. So again, I kind of skip this stitch that's behind my post stitch, insert my hook into the next one, and do a double crochet. So I'm going to keep going with this pattern until I reach the end of my row. I will stop narrating everything that I'm doing, but I'll leave it on the video just so you can kind of follow along. And I'm almost done with this row. So because we have an odd number of stitches, we will both start and stop on a regular double crochet. I do not typically end rows with a post stitch. It just kind of leaves like a weird gap on the side, and I don't like it. Alright, so we've got our first row. Now we're going to do kind of our buffer row of single crochets. But first, I'm just going to, before I do my chain to turn, I'm just going to count to double check to make sure that I have 13 stitches still. Yep. So it's always a good habit to count your stitches after every row, just to make sure you're not losing any stitches or skipping anything. With the Alpine stitch, it's pretty easy to tell when you've skipped one because your repeats won't end up like the right way. So I've chained one and I'm turned. This is another single crochet buffer row. This helps us to create a solid fabric, so without like gaps. If we just did the post stitches, it would be pretty gappy, so it wouldn't be good for like winter items like hats or sweaters, like things that you want to keep you warm. So like I said, this is just single crochets. So basically we're going to keep alternating rows of post stitches and rows of single crochets until we get it as big as we want to. But with our post stitch rows, those are the rows that are like offset. So now my last single crochet goes into the top of the starting chain. My starting chain was a little bit tight, so I kind of had to jam it in there. But here's what the back looks like so far. It's got a little bit of texture to it from the post stitches, but it's pretty plain compared to what the front looks like so far. But, alright, I'm going to chain 2 and turn. So this chain 2 counts as my first stitch, but now to offset, I need another double crochet. So in the second stitch, I'll put another double crochet. This is just a regular one. And now I'll be able to alternate. So for this row, you're going to be crocheting into all the double crochets from before, from row 3, all the ones that don't have post stitches. So like this is a post stitch, so we'll skip it and we'll put our next post stitch here. So skip, post stitch, skip, post stitch, skip, post stitch, all the way to the end. So I've got my 2 double crochets. I've yarned over and I'm going to do my front post double crochet into this stitch. So it's between my post stitches from row 3. I've inserted my hook pulling up a loop. So these front post double crochets are the same as before now. So I'll like skip this stitch that's behind my post stitch and I'll insert a regular double crochet here. The only difference with this row compared to row 3 is that it's offset. So instead of starting and ending with 1 double crochet, we'll start and end with 2 double crochets, which is what gives us that cool like alternating pattern. So see how these are opposite of the other post stitches? Oops. So this right here is going to be my last post stitch, and then I'll finish with 2 double crochets. So I'll skip this stitch that's behind my post stitch and crochet a double crochet into the second to last stitch and the last stitch. So, all right, now I'll do another row of single crochets and then I'll be back at this repeat here. So you'll notice that this one has 2, 4, 6 of the post stitches, and this one just has 5 because they go in the middle. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But then we'll have another row with like the 6. So I'll do my row of single crochets. All right. So here's what the back looks like again. I think it's pretty cool looking. So if you were to make an Alpine stitch blanket, it wouldn't be truly reversible where the same thing is on both sides. But I mean, it still does look pretty cool. So if it gets like flipped on your couch or something, it's still pretty to look at. But here's what our Alpine stitch is shaping up to look like. Remember, we'll chain 2 to start this row. This counts as a double crochet. Then I'll yarn over and turn my work. And now I'm going to put my front post double crochets in these. So on the previous row, these were just normal double crochets. But on this row, we're going to like cover them with front post stitches. So this is the same as row 3. And like I said, you just alternate these rows until your project is however big you want it to be. Once you get the hang of it, I find that the Alpine stitch goes pretty fast. I'm not going like maximum speed right now, but I am going a little bit faster just to kind of show you what it looks like when you get in the groove. Since everything is a double crochet, you can kind of use like your muscle memory on each row. I find that when I'm alternating between like single crochets and double crochets, then I end up like yarning over for every single crochet and then having to like fix it. But since these are just double crochets and like double crochet post stitches, you're starting everything off the same. So here's the end of my row. Remember, I skip the one that's behind my post stitch and then I insert my hook into that last stitch and do my double crochet. So here we go. You'll just keep alternating. So you'll do row 3 and then a row of single crochets and then row 5 and then a row of single crochets and then here's another row 3 repeat that I just finished. And you'll just keep working on that until whenever you're done. So you could use this 14 stitch thing. You could just keep going and going until you have like a scarf. This is about scarf width. Or you can just like trim your yarn, call this done, and just live your life with this little swatch and then start a bigger project using this. It is totally up to you. But this is the Alpine stitch. So thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe, to follow You Should Craft. Check out the You Should Craft blog for more free patterns and tutorials. And that's it. Hopefully this was helpful for your crochet journey. So thank you for watching.